Measles outbreaks are devastating countries across the globe, linked to a massive drop in vaccination rates. The World Health Organization has raised the alarm and ranked vaccine hesitancy as one of the top 10 threats to public health awareness everywhere. Washington State has experienced a measles outbreak in the past month, and South Africa is not immune to this as well. Dr. Yogan Pillay, Deputy Director General at the Department of Health, said that 85% of children in South Africa are fully immunized by the age of 1 year. But the most recent data from the country's Medical Research Council suggests that this figure is closer to 70%. Now, there are a number of factors that contribute to this, with access to rural areas being one, where parents find it difficult to get to clinics, and medical practitioners also finding it hard to reach many in the rural areas. Other factors is, of course, the anti-vaccination drives being fueled by misinformation and bogus studies that have been debunked and proven to be false. One of these studies that fueled this widespread fear that vaccines increase the risk of autism originated with a 1997 study published by Andrew Wakefield, which was a British surgeon. And this article was published in the British Medical Journal, suggested that the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, the MMR vaccine, was increasing autism in British children. The paper has since been completely discredited due to serious procedural errors, undisclosed financial conflicts of interest, and ethical violations. Andrew Wakefield, of course, lost his medical license, and the paper was retracted from the British Medical Journal. Nonetheless, we still find people today, several major studies were conducted, that still think that there is a link between the vaccine and the likelihood of developing autism. Today, the true causes of autism remain a mystery, but to the discredit of the autism vaccination link theory, several studies have now identified symptoms of autism in children well before they receive the MMR vaccine. And even more recent research provides evidence that autism develops in the uterus well before a baby is born or receives vaccinations. But I want to speak about the religious side of things. Does religious doctrine and sentiments play a role in the anti-vaxxer communities? Now, Huffington Post recently looked at this, and I will discuss some of the research that came out and that was done in the article. And firstly, we look at Christianity. This religious group, the group most commonly associated with anti-vaccination sentiment within the Christian community, is the Church of Christ Scientist, or Christian Scientist as they are commonly known as. Now, they routinely turn down vaccinations, which has been linked to a number of measles outbreaks among members of the faith. But the church does not list any formal objections to vaccinations on its website. And Mary Baker Eddy, who was the founder of the movement, was reportedly in favor of vaccines. And she's quoted as saying, "Rather than quarrel over vaccination, I recommend, if the law demand, that an individual submit to this process, that he obey the law and then appeal to the gospel to save him from bad physical results." A large contingent of the Dutch Reformed Church, which is a Protestant denomination, and they've recently been in the spotlight here in South Africa, but that's a story for another day, where they went up against to the LGBT community, where they wanted to overturn their ruling that the lesbian, gay, queer, transsexual priests were allowed to be ordained in the church, and also the church would be able to perform marriages, but that's a story for another day. They've historically turned down vaccinations. They hold that vaccines can interfere with a person's personal relationship with God. The Catholic Church has in the past expressed moral objections to vaccines manufactured using voluntarily aborted fetuses. The Church urges Catholics to find alternatives in such cases, but it argues that faithful shouldn't turn down immunizations and sacrifice the common good of public health. There's also a common misconception that the Amish are wary of some modern technology and don't vaccinate. They actually do. Some unvaccinated pockets of the traditional Amish community have been at the center of measles outbreaks in the past, but as a whole, the religious community has nothing against getting immunized. A handful of conservative Christian groups, including the anti-LGBTQ, anti-abortion rights Family Research Council, have argued that certain vaccines targeting sexually transmitted diseases will encourage promiscuity among young people. Some Christian groups, including the Catholic Church, reject the use of birth control for similar reasons. Well, most Jehovah's Witnesses will be completely unaware of the Watchtower Society's once firm position against the crime, in inverted commas, of vaccinations. In the early part of the last century, humanity was on the verge of a new age when plagues as old as mankind were, about to be extinguished. And of course, that tool that was used to exterminate this was the vaccination programs, especially smallpox, which was one of the most deadly diseases in history. And thanks to the vaccination program, this was accomplished. However, the Watchtower Society did not consider this program a benefit to humankind. And I'll quote from the Golden Age, the January the 5th, 1929 article on page 502. It says there, thinking people would rather have smallpox than vaccination, because the latter sows seeds of syphilis, cancers, eczema, erysipelas, scrofula, consumption, even leprosy, and many other loathsome affections. Hence, the practice of vaccinations is a crime, an outrage, and a delusion. It also said in the October the 12th, 1921 Golden Age, vaccination never prevented anything and never will, and is the most barbarous practice. We are in the last days, and the devil is slowly losing his hand, making a strenuous effort, meanwhile, to do all the damage he can. And to his credit, can such evils be placed? Use your rights as American citizens to forever abolish the devilish practice of vaccinations. Now, thankfully, the Jehovah's Witnesses have changed their stance on this issue. It was quite obvious to the Watchtower Society that a vaccination ban could easily cost many lives, and there is little doubt that it did cost lives. However, the threat of financial cost to the Watchtower Society brought around by this so-called new light on the question. This financial cost probably outweighed, the financial costs in terms of lawsuits could have outweighed the actually changing their stance and the cost of actually changing their stance on this. Now, in the Watchtower, the December 15, 1952 Watchtower, the dramatic reversal on vaccinations is actually discussed in a question from readers section. It says there, after consideration of the matter, it does not appear to us to be in violation of the everlasting covenant made with Noah as set down in Genesis 9 verse 4, nor contrary to God's related commandment at Leviticus 17:10-14. Most certainly it cannot reasonably or scripturally be argued and proved that by being vaccinated, the inoculated person is either eating or drinking blood and consuming it as food or receiving a blood transfusion. So not a single word of apology was ever issued to those who risked and, in some cases, wasted their lives believing in this fairy tale from the Jehovah's Witness leaders. Now, Judaism is, of course, another religion. And let's look at what Judaism says with regards to vaccination. Now, most major branches of Judaism hold that people have a moral responsibility to maintain their health, including getting vaccinated. According to Orthodox Jewish group Shabbat, in 1956 it read, I think this was a prominent rabbi, wrote on the importance of vaccinations in 1956, And he stated that it is with regard to matters such as these that the axiom, do not set yourself apart from the community, applies. You should act according to that which is done by the parents of the majority of children who are in your children's classes. However, a measles outbreak hit Southern California in January and specifically appeared to be spreading in the Orthodox Jewish community in Los Angeles. And none of the 18 LA County residents who got the virus could provide proof of vaccination, according to the Los Angeles Times. So this may be indicative of a trend among ultra-Orthodox communities of turning away from vaccinations, which has been correlated to a number of measles outbreaks in recent years. Members of these communities occasionally cite fears that vaccines carry potential health risks, but such concerns are not rooted in a religious belief. The other major religion, which is Islam, some vaccines contain pork gelatin, and the consumption of which both Islam and Judaism have rules prohibiting. But leaders in both faiths have come forward saying that receiving a vaccine with pork-derived material does not constitute oral consumption. And in California, which recently eliminated non-medical exemptions to immunizations, a handful of Nation of Islam leaders objected to the changes, citing widely rejected fears that certain vaccines could increase the risk of autism among black men. And it says there in the objection, the leaders said the mandate carried echoes of the government's Tuskegee syphilis study, which is an infamous study conducted between 1932 and 1972 in which federal researchers withheld treatment from African American men who had the disease. They did not cite specific religious objections to the law in this regard. Other faiths, including Hindu, Sikhism, and Buddhist texts and doctrine, contain no teachings in opposition to immunizations. And in 2010, the Dalai Lama, the Buddhist leader, helped initiate a polio eradication drive in India. So there's no actual text or doctrine in Hinduism or Sikhism and Buddhism that prevent their followers from getting immunized or vaccinated. Objections to vaccinations can also be found among some left-leaning holistic health proponents and pockets of spiritual and New Age communities. Some of those objecting to mandatory vaccination laws point to the debunked conspiracy theory that some vaccines cause autism. And we know that this has been debunked. The whole Andrew Wakefield research study in the British Medical Journal. So that is some of the religious community's view with regard to vaccinations. And I'm going to leave you with this. If you are an anti-vaxxer listening to this and still basing your reasons on a now widely discredited and retracted article written by a now disbarred doctor, then you are putting your children's lives and the lives of other people's children at stake. Just stop the nonsense. Until next week, this is Robin Jackson for Cult Life.